Okay, thanks for that. I think we'll get going here. We'll bring the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, February 13th to order. Of course, I will begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, our unique special relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. So with that, I'll get a motion to adopt receipt agenda items moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, just a show of hands. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Get a motion, please, to adopt B1 special meeting minutes, part of the adoption of minutes for the special council meeting for budget purposes on January 30th. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion on that? I'll call the question on that one. B1. Again, it is not actually a touchscreen. B1, there we go. You got to vote. Councillor Ferguson. There we go. That carries unanimously. Moving on to B2, regular council meeting of January 30th. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Martins. Any discussion on the meetings from January 30th? The minutes from January 30th? Seeing none, call that question. B2. That carries unanimously with Councillor Richter absent. Move on to delegation C1. Ms. Peterson and Dr. Wong, please come forward. Good to see you again. It's been a while since I've seen you. Good to see you.
For having us. I can just move that PowerPoint up.
So just state your names for the record and where you're from, where you reside. We don't ask for the streets anymore, just your neighborhood or
Okay.
wherever you're generally from. And go ahead.
Great. I'm Ellen Peterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Langley Division of Family Practice. And with me, I have Dr. Leo Wong.
I'm a family physician in Langley, as well as being the PCN, Primary Care Network Physician Lead for the Langley Division.
Great. So we're going to walk you through the primary care network in Langley in our 5 minutes. And overall, our goal is to get every resident of the Township of Langley a family doctor or a nurse practitioner, which has been a really big challenge in the province of BC. You already acknowledged our land, so we too appreciate where we're working. We're going to go through a little bit of the current landscape, what the PCN does, what it is, and the timeline and support we would like from Township and Mayor. We've split this out just for the Township for your purposes. So there are 82 family physicians, 29 patient medical homes or practices, 1 hospital, and 3 community partners whose head offices are actually in the Township, not the city. About 24,000 unattached patients right now, growing issues of mental illness, substance use, isolation, frail elderly, on and off reserve for Indigenous populations as well. What is a PCN? Really, it's the practices, the health services, and the not-for-profit services, wrapping care around a person so that it's timely and it's what they need so they can get better. We pulled the city out of the Murrayville and Brookswood PCN, so Langley Division is proposing, and all of our membership, 3 primary care networks throughout the Langleys, North, Central, and East. We draw to your attention, certainly the East is an area where there hasn't been a lot of practices or a lot of city center, so we're struggling with that population a little bit, lots of growth coming. Murrayville and Brookswood and the city would be about 50,000 people total, and then the North is our largest PCN. Slightly different issues in each area, as I'm sure you're aware, but younger maternity in the Willoughby Slope, more mental health, substance use, if we include the city, and a lot of isolation, as well as Indigenous spread throughout our territories. How are we going to do it? 21 new family doctors and 12 new nurse practitioners. We need to add more locums. The physicians we have, like Dr. Wong, they carry panels of 2,500 to 3,000 patients each, and most of our physicians still work in the hospital, deliver babies, or do palliative care and long-term care. So it's the same group. They're tired and they need a bit of a break, so locums for them. Net new FPs, we have seen a lot of retirements, and then nurse practitioners are welcome here in Langley and part of our division, part of our board leadership. We teach new doctors, so one of the best ways we can actually recruit is to have a strong teaching environment. With the expansion of the SFU and UBC schools, Langley practices teach. In fact, Leo's students here today. We are going to take care, there's about 6,000 people on our attachment wait list right now waiting for a family doctor. What can we do for them now? How quickly can we move that list? And then worries about screenings and other healthcare needs while folks wait. We are adding allied health, so team-based care. We talk to the physicians a lot about if you didn't go to med school to do this, can anybody else help you do it, particularly in mental health. Expanded hours. Lots of our patients don't have access in the evenings or the weekend hours. That's something we're partnering with 811 on. And then Langley Community Health Center, or a type of cooperative. When we went out to our not-for-profits, all 11 valued attachment to primary care in the division, and all 11 wanted to partner with us on any net new resources. Some of our priority populations: Indigenous, mums and babes. We deliver about 1,800 babies a year and did the majority of White Rocks last year as well. Mental health and substance use, top ask from our family doctors. They're without access to psychiatry, counseling, and other services that would help keep patients well. And then frail and elderly, growing number, particularly in the township. It's going to be a lot of work, is what this slide basically means. 4 years to attach 34,000 people, including the city and the township. We do think we can do it. We have recruited about 70 doctors in the last 10 years. And so we're competing outright on attaching and attracting family doctors and nurse practitioners here in our community. We need virtual, we need in-person. We didn't tackle every single priority population, but we certainly could have. We have a lot of support from our partners and willingness to work with us. And then we're curious about how you can help and what we can do together. Obviously, being aware of the primary care network is really important. Help us recruit. If you know someone named Doctor, I'm looking. You can just pass them on to me. I'll actually figure out where they could go and retain them. I do mean that. I see Mayor smiling, but access to township infrastructure. So there are times where your facilities might be advantageous. If we're doing group or mental health counseling, we might do a pop-up or a wellness clinic or a screening clinic. We also asked you to consider, if you're doing development in the township, is there space for practices? Have you thought about that? Could there be design space? Are there any perks we could offer family doctors who want to be here in Langley and care for the residents? And then, of course, we're open to your ideas. Did I miss anything?
Great. So I just have two members of council, two questions so far, but I wanted to ask you a bit more about township infrastructure now in regards to development. So I've actually had a couple of meetings with some of the leadership at the Langley Memorial Hospital about whether there's some way to incorporate availability of space within development, say in Willoughby or the Brookswood areas, that would be set aside for this purpose, similar to what we're trying to get to with childcare. What do you think about that? And if those were made available, would they sit for some period of time, or is the physicians there, is the capital there to renovate and open these areas if they were required as part of the development process?
Yeah, I think it would be. Most of our doctors actually own or lease their own clinics. They are expanding and renovating themselves, which is kind of interesting because they do provide a public service and care. We have practices that are so successful they're out of space. And so where we see big density in housing, yes, we'd love for people to consider where would ideal practice space go? Could there be some kind of amenity bonus? When you get into the not-for-profit and community health center, it becomes a much larger capital ask. We have been instructed by the ministry not to put any capital asks in, so we'd be curious how we would partner with that. The other ask we have is we don't know politics and we're not very good at it. We don't have time to learn. We need you to advocate for resources to come to Langley. There are other communities who have received millions while we continue to wait. So that is something we ask both city and we'll ask yourself every table, Fraser Health, the province. We've met with the MLAs. We need resources, clinical resources to come to Langley as quickly as possible, and we'll make sure they get to patients.
Yeah, and I've been asking those questions and starting to explore some initial ideas on involving it in the development process, similar to like a child care action plan. Yeah.
And the nice thing is we're a bit more nimble than Fraser Health. Our spaces are smaller. We can move faster. We have less layers of bureaucracy to actually get a clinic opened.
I'm going to move on to many questions from Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, and thank you very much for being here. Talking about recruiting physicians and nurse practitioners, can you expand, if possible, a little bit on any Langley-specific challenges or competitive advantages? As you know, you talk about the 70 you've recruited over the last 10 years. Is there a way we can scale that up, or a barrier?
It's actually because we still go to the hospital, we deliver babies, we do long-term care. So if you're following Dr. Wong around, you get exposure and learn about all those things, and it allows us to recruit you and also keep those networks strong. Langley itself, I mean, our hospital, the foundation's been investing in, but certainly could be larger. There could be more specialties around. We do all know one another and teach together, so the fact the networks form across Langley has been hugely advantage. And we just really outright compete. We do have some things around blended practice, teaching practice, team-based care and practice, higher MOA, medical office assistant to GP that we recruit on. We also drop everything when a recruit gets a hold of me, my staff, or a key member on our board, and we immediately customize what kind of job are you looking for in Langley. We will find you that fit, and we'll help retain you.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, thank you for coming. One of my questions was, what are some of the strategies other communities are using to attract doctors, and what's our competition? Is there a community that they're drawing to because of certain things, or?
Yeah, the new payment model actually announced by the ministry is helping. That will help us recruit from Ontario and Alberta, where they're a little bit disgruntled. Amongst BC, Langley just outright over competes. So although it's hard on Surrey if I compete with Langley, we just outright compete around practice settings, size of practice, networks you want to be involved in, want to do maternity, don't want to do maternity. We customize all that for you. We do know every single one of our practices and the doctors in them, so it's a little easier for us to do fit. If they're focused more around an older panel, they're a higher volume, they're seeing unattached patients, we tend to know what the drivers are and just are really comfortable with people, what they're looking for. Because we offer everything, we actually have been quite successful at recruiting doctors who want to work in the hospital. Langley's one of the few communities other than Chilliwack where that's still possible. Leo, Dr. Wong, sees his own patients in hospital before he comes to work. And that's been both highly attractive and also a deterrent. So it depends who I'm talking to, whether we play that up or not, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Van Popten.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I had, a question in regards to the new compensation model that the government came out with, and if that's going to help. The other comment that I have, and hopefully you can, speak to it, is that I know that there's a wait list to get into medical school. I know somebody personally who's waited 3 years, meets all the requirements, still doesn't have a spot to get into medical school. So there's people out there who want to become doctors and are having a hard time getting into a spot. Is there something that we can do at this level, or is there any information that you can give on how we're going to overcome that challenge to get more people into the field of medicine?
Yeah, go ahead, Liam.
So what you're alluding to is for years, the medical school enrollment at UBC was stuck at 120. And that was for the entire province, and we only had one medical school in the province. I think, as you well know, SFU will be opening a medical school soon. But finding the teachers, the clinical teachers, to give medical students the opportunity to experience family medicine in the community is probably key. But that is also quite challenging. One of the things we have on our radar is the need for more teachers to teach right in their clinics.
We also involve med students and residents in the division and are on our board. So we're often reaching out to them to say, how would you design the system you want to work in? So that's been highly effective. Each division is representative of its community. We're very fortunate in here. Nurse practitioners, residents, med students were welcomed at the division and included right at every table. So that's been key. Doctors teach doctors. That's my worry. There's not enough of them. It's an 11-year, going to be a 12-year turnaround to get someone through university to practice level.
Is that including the wait times to even get into medical school?
That does not include. That includes if you go straight through. There's a 3rd year of residency coming out now. We will have a whole year where no doctors add to the field. So, yeah, it's a very big challenge and it'll take a long time, but do advocate for those positions, advocate for family doctors to be paid and for their teaching to be compensated and to be appreciated even is key. I don't doubt our 70 recruits. I'd say over half of them came because they learned here. So that's another thing we're adding to family doctors like Leo and Carolyn to their day.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. McDonald, Ms. Pedersen for coming, Dr. Wong for coming today. Again, it's been a while since we've seen you and throughout the community, actually, even prior to COVID. I guess it's been discussed about the new medical schools, it's been discussed about practices, but myself, I like to use an example. I think everybody in this room could have a question about healthcare. I think that's a reality of interesting. I think my daughter and her fiance, they wanted to become doctors, and they ended up going a different route. One's a PhD, and he's working for Fraser Health, so he's working in medical field. My other daughter, she's finishing off her PhD, and she'll be doing, I guess, something regarding pain management for practitioners. So they're both in the medical field, but they just didn't go in. They chose not to go in the medical. They didn't pass the MCAP or whatever that thing was, and they just moved on. But what I did want to ask you is that now that the standards may indeed be changing, I've had 2 of our doctors retire on me, and so we found another doctor in Surrey. So we were fortunate enough to do that. Do you think there is an opportunity in the future, and I'm not talking about family doctors, but maybe surgical and otherwise, and it's the elephant in the room about what they're doing, I guess, in Ontario and across other provinces is the elephant in the room, private care for people that want to get a knee replacement or something like that. If I may, I'll ask you that question, if I may, through a chair.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent question around how care should be delivered, whether it's in a hospital or a private clinic. I think we cherish the fact that everyone who has a medical need should receive that, regardless of whether they can pay for it or not. But it doesn't have to be delivered in the high-level acute care hospital. It can be done in other places. And I think what you're alluding to is that we need to constantly think and rethink how we deliver healthcare. It's obviously a system that's really cherished by all of us in our community, and any time that we can look at different ways and doing it better, I think we'd be really open to it.
Yeah, and I think we already have private medicine here. It's not really for us to solve, but we do need solutions, and we do have patients waiting and suffering. So you can't get a mammogram if you don't have a doctor's name to write on it.
I mean, I guess the reason I'm kind of putting this elephant in the room is that people tend to be, and I don't follow this statistically, tend to be waiting a lot longer than they probably expect. And if they could afford to have the resources to do it, but that's, as I say, it's a challenge, if I may.
Mm-hmm. And effective ways, because there have been investments in healthcare. What's the most effective way to do it? Who's the best to do it? Primary care in our communities and the practices have massive numbers. They're the only people that are attaching any patients at all. So we have about 125,000 attached right now in Langley, and they're offering to do the next 34,000. So I just harness that, and anything they can think of that will help them work, we do.
And thank you, Alan and Dr. Wong. You guys, I've known you for a few years. You really are passionate about the work you deliver, and the community really thanks you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I just had one last question. We have a lot of newcomers that come to Canada, many who have practiced in their first country as doctors and nurses. Is there anything the government is doing, because I've heard, little bits and pieces, to help them practice in Canada to sort of alleviate some of the shortages that we have?
I think that's an excellent, very topical question because it's a balance between making sure that their practice standards knowledge is up to what we would expect a practitioner in Canada to have, but at the same time, they are well trained in their previous countries. The provincial government has put in more money into allowing these physicians to be assessed in a practice setting, and that's actually a really good place. And we can probably do more. And basically, at that point, decide: are these practitioners, can they go into the Canadian system directly with a minimal amount of supervision, or do they need to go through a whole residency again? And really getting a good understanding where that practitioner could be in that spectrum.
Of course, that takes time and,
And money,
okay.
yeah.
But at least they've started that
Yes.
process. Okay.
And like Leo said, the 120 spots, there's so few spots for IMGs that even want to redo residency. They're opting for other fields. I think there were 17,000 applications for 56 spots. A lot of number problems.
Very well. I want to thank you again for bringing it forward. It was something, the discussions had already been ongoing with some, so I appreciate you bringing it to council. And thank you again for your presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'd be happy to update you any way that works as well.
So I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'd like to see if anybody wishes to make a motion to refer the presentation to staff to come back with some work plan options of what we may want this council to consider to assist with township infrastructure for care delivery. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is anybody opposed to that? Show of hands. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Bauer, did you get that? You good? Good. Thank you. So move on to C2, Surrey Langley SkyTrain project presentation. Thank you again for coming today. You can just state your names and I guess positions and roles with TransLink and specific to this project for those members of council that may not be familiar. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Good afternoon. So my name is Jennifer McLean. I'm the Executive Project Director of the Surrey Langley SkyTrain project. I'm with Transportation Investment Corporation, which is the provincial crown corporation that's delivering the project. And Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena Banfield. I'm the Senior Manager of Stakeholders on the project.
First of all, I'd like to also acknowledge with gratitude that I'm speaking to you in the traditional territories today of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. And I'm here today to provide you an update on the Surrey Langley SkyTrain project. Many of you are familiar with it, but 2022 was a big year for us, and I'm quite excited to highlight some of the milestones, share where we are today, and share with you what's planned for the upcoming year as we advance towards our major construction in 2024. So in today's presentation, I look forward to touching on several important topics, including the project's benefits, the alignment, the stations, the procurement process, and our next steps. So as you know, the Surrey Langley SkyTrain station will extend the Expo Line 16 kilometers, primarily along Fraser Highway, on an elevated guideway from King George SkyTrain Station in Surrey to 203 Street in Langley City. It includes 8 stations and 3 transit exchanges, 2 of which are in the township and the city of Langley at 196 Street and 203 Street. This extension will dramatically improve transportation options in the region, especially for those who live, work, study, and play south of the Fraser. Not only will the project provide a fast, reliable, and sustainable transit option, but the alignment was designed to generally run within the road right-of-way, which has enabled us to incorporate its safe and accessible multi-use pathways to access the new stations and the surrounding areas. I'll speak more to this in just a few minutes. So as we know, the area south of the Fraser River is one of the fastest growing areas in the region. The population of the city of Surrey, the township of Langley, and the city of Langley is projected to increase by almost 500,000 people and 150,000 new jobs by the year 2050. As the population south of the Fraser continues to grow, so too does the demand for transit. Delivery of the Surrey Langley SkyTrain project enables us to meet collective objectives that are key to the future of the region, such as providing sustainable multimodal transportation choices to better connect the region, supporting integrated development that includes safe and accessible active transportation to affordable housing, services, employment, and other destinations, fostering healthy communities and a healthy environment, creating economic development and job growth, and implementing a key component of the 2014 Mayor's Council's 10-year vision to deliver rapid transit along Fraser Highway from the City of Surrey to Langley City Centre. The provincial government is pleased to deliver this critical infrastructure project on behalf of the region. The priority investment in expanded transit south of the Fraser serves as a catalyst to transform this region in many respects. The alignment of mutual priorities and shared values is significant. For example, the Surrey Langley SkyTrain project supports the township's efforts to deliver on its climate action strategy through the 5 big moves, which includes safe and sustainable transportation and targets a replacement of more than half of the current passenger vehicle trips with sustainable modes of transportation by the year 2030. The project will connect the region with several town centres south of the Fraser. The potential for job growth and economic opportunity is exciting. Local businesses will be better able to attract employees from further afield because of these new transportation options. For example, on opening day in 2028, we'll see a 22-minute travel time between Langley Centre and King George SkyTrain Station and a 65-minute trip to and from downtown Vancouver. That translates into an approximately 20-minute SkyTrain journey between 196th Street Station and King George, and just over an hour from 196 down to Waterfront Station. By way of comparison, these same journeys by car today during rush hours see commuters spending 45 minutes to travel from the Willowbrook Mall area to King George SkyTrain, and approximately an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and a half to get down to Waterfront Station. On opening day, we'll also see 14 kilometers of new active transportation pathways that will help facilitate access to and from the new stations and will drive our transit ridership. By the year 2050, the project will have realized numerous important long-term benefits, including daily reductions in vehicle kilometers traveled, a reduction in GHG emissions, more than 20,000 new jobs that are accessible by transit, and 100,000 new residents living within 800 meters of our new stations. Of the daily weekly ridership of 80,000 in the year 2050, approximately 43% of those will be those who have switched modes of transportation, primarily from their cars. Also of note is the fact that the 100,000 new residents living in close proximity to the stations that I quoted is a conservative projection, one that will be augmented as municipal OCPs, neighborhood and land use plans, such as Township's Willowbrook Community Plan, are finalized and implemented in the future. I'd like to touch on this last point a bit more. Transit-oriented development around new stations presents great opportunities to advance collective priorities, such as creating affordable housing, combating climate change, and unlocking economic and social benefits for all of us to enjoy. The impact that transit has on shaping growth is well documented. Accordingly, the need for transit-responsive land use designations to ensure that this transit investment is optimized is a shared priority. That is why all project partners, meaning the province, TransLink, and the 3 municipalities through which a project will run, signed the overarching supportive policy agreement last year. That gave way to the collaborative study between the province, TransLink, the 3 municipalities, and Metro Vancouver on the exciting possibilities around the future 196th Street Station. Transit-oriented develop helps to foster complete, connected, and livable communities, ones that are supported by multimodal transportation options and diverse services and amenities such as childcare, healthcare, employment and educational opportunities, commercial enterprises, and public spaces and points of recreation. This is why the province is being intentional in the design of integrated stations to support future adjacent forms of development, which will help create seamless transitions for passengers to move from them between transit and shops, restaurants, services, work, and home. And there are successful examples across the region that serve as models for this type of integrated development, including the Marine Drive Station and King George stations that are shown here. Another collective priority is enhancing active transportation options. This is an important component of this project, so I'm going to speak on it a little bit more now. So active transportation refers to the use of one's body to move from place to place. It includes walking, cycling, or assisted mobility devices. The province is committed to doubling the percentage of active transportation trips while reducing GHGs in the transportation sector by 23 to 30% by the year 2030. The Surrey Langley SkyTrain project will help to realize that goal with new multi-use pathways to and from the new stations along Fraser Highway. Where the alignment does not run along the highway between 196 and 203, we're working closely with the Township of Langley and the City of Langley to confirm pathways that will enable active transportation options and users to travel safely and efficiently between these two stations. In fact, the new multi-use pathways will actually be the township's first two-way cycle tracks. The project includes safe, active transportation infrastructure that significantly upgrades that which currently exists. In terms of cycling amenities, each station will have either bike racks or an enclosed bike parking facility that adheres to TransLink standards. The bike parking is included in the confirmed land footprint of the stations, and the plans maximize allowable space. Once the project is complete, the fully separated bike and pedestrian lanes, multi-use pathways, and cycling amenities will support local government efforts to achieve Vision Zero targets, as well as our regional targets, like the 850-kilometer network of major bikeways that's outlined in TransLink's draft Future Regional Transportation Strategy, T2050. So as previously noted, the project will extend the Expo Line 16 kilometers on an elevated guideway, primarily along Fraser Highway from King George Station in Surrey to 203 Street in Langley. The alignment was designed to generally run within the road right-of-way. In some areas, it runs along the center of the highway, in others on the north or the south side. The project design minimizes the number of guideway crossings of the highway. Again, there's going to be 8 new stations and 3 transit exchanges at 166, 196, and 203 Street stations, which connect people to additional bus routes across the region and support overall ridership growth. This next image of cross sections looks at a couple of sample sections of the alignment. The center running guideway between 140th and 148th in Surrey, the north running guideway at 152, the south running guideway through the Agricultural Land Reserve, and the south running guideway along Industrial Avenue leading to the terminus station at 203 Street. As mentioned, the project also integrates active transportation infrastructure along the full length of the extension. Extensive modeling, as well as other key considerations listed on the slide, help to inform our future station locations, which are situated at 140th, 152, 160, 166, 184, 190, 196, and 203 streets. In addition, we considered how we could best connect local communities to active transportation facilities more easily in an effort to improve connectivity and support long-term city planning initiatives. I'll speak now to the 2 future stations that we built in the township and the City of Langley. The renderings I'm going to show form part of the project's reference concept design, but of course, our final station designs will come from our project contractors through a robust procurement process. I'll speak to more in short order. TransLink is leading the station naming process, which follows an established process, including engagement with project partners and adheres to set guidelines and criteria. So here is the station at Willowbrook Mall at 196th Street and Fraser Highway. It'll feature a transit exchange to facilitate ridership from the Township of Langley, Cloverdale, and other areas, and to accommodate redevelopment of the surrounding area. The transit exchange will facilitate and allow greater connectivity and help to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles in the township. Prior to the SkyTrain's in-service date, TransLink will develop a bus network plan and reconfigure the local bus routes as necessary to ensure that more people can connect to the rapid transit, increasing access to local jobs, schools, housing, shopping, services, and rec facilities. Indeed, of the 8 new stations, this one at 196 will be the 3rd busiest after 203 and 152 Street Station in Surrey. Additional features at the transit exchange include electric bus charging facilities, a pickup and drop-off area, and a bike parking parkade. Future development around 196 Street supports transit-oriented development goals and active transportation principles by integrating the multimodal transportation, housing, employment opportunities, and community services. Similarly, the station at 203 Street in Langley City Centre is the catalyst for a major revitalization of the area, underscored by the city's updated OCP, which was updated in November of 2021. It identifies a transit core 400 meters from the SkyTrain terminus station, which will help to foster a vibrant, thriving, transit-oriented neighborhood in Langley City Centre. This area, supported by the SkyTrain extension and bus exchange, will connect residents and visitors to the rest of Metro Vancouver, and conversely, draw people from around the region. A $128 million package of advanced works is well underway. By carrying out these advanced activities before our major construction starts, it provides our contractors with greater certainty about site conditions, which in turn will support a more efficient process by mitigating potential for cost increases and schedule delays. Our advanced works includes a collection of utility line relocations, starting with raising transmission lines where they cross the alignment in 2 different locations. This was completed last year. We've also undergrounded distribution lines at 2 more locations, also completed last year, and further work at Quibble Creek, which will be completed this year. We've initiated the design and cost estimating to relocate the transmission lines where they cross the alignment at the CP rail crossing. This work is underway. And relocation of the BC Hydro distribution lines along the length of Fraser Highway. This design work is also underway. And conceptual design for our power propulsion system duct bank, also underway. The property acquisition process, of course, is also well underway to secure the land we need to accommodate the guideway and our stations. Project contractors will need to consider environmental conditions in their final design proposals. While the project is not required to undergo a formal provincial or federal environmental assessment, due largely to the fact the alignment will run along an existing urban transportation corridor, the province is committed to a robust analysis of environmental conditions related to the project. The Environmental Screening Review, or ESR, examines the full alignment, both potential impacts and mitigations, and it's nearing completion. It'll be available online shortly. The study includes noise and vibration, fisheries and aquatics, vegetation and wildlife, air quality and GHGs, and a number of other topics. The province is committed to strong working relationships with affected Indigenous communities and is working closely with 6 Indigenous groups on this project, including Katzie First Nation, Kwantlen First Nation, Matsqui First Nation, Musqueam First Nation, Semiahmoo First Nation, and Tsawwassen First Nation. To date, the Indigenous groups have provided input into our ESR and the reference concept design, and have also participated in key archaeology and environmental fieldwork we've undertaken. We'll continue to engage with the affected Indigenous groups to explore economic development, cultural recognition, and other potential opportunities throughout the project delivery. We're also engaging with our project partners, key stakeholders, and the public on this important project. In terms of the work we are involved with project partners and with staff at the Township of Langley, one of the more substantive areas is the municipal agreement, which addresses the project's requirements for construction and operation of the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain. This is a great example of how both levels of government are working together to effectively achieve the project's objectives. We're also in the process of connecting with local community organizations, advocacy groups, businesses, residents, and institutions. This includes listening to feedback on how to mitigate our construction impacts, particularly for businesses and residents. We'll work closely with our construction contractors to maintain access to properties and provide timely notifications of traffic detours. Ensuring that communities know that local enterprises are open for businesses during construction is a key priority for the project. Of note, we're also working to engage diverse and underrepresented audiences through an equity analysis process, which will continue throughout the project's procurement and construction phases. Affordable, reliable, and accessible transit is an essential lever to increase equity for many communities by providing access to jobs, housing, education and health, and childcare services. And as you may know, the province conducted a formal public engagement last spring, and this engagement helped to inform elements of our planning, such as active transportation and our ESR, and we will look forward to holding future opportunities as the project develops. So following approval of our project's business case last July, which was a milestone occasion, we launched our multiple contract procurement process in early August with a request for qualifications, or an RFQ, for the guideway contract. This includes the construction of the elevated guideway itself, all the roadworks, the utility relocations, and active transportation elements. This was followed by the launch of our stations contract last October. This contract includes the construction of all 8 stations, including active transportation around the new stations. And our third contract for systems and track work was launched in mid-November. As you can imagine, this is the design and installation of all the track work on the SkyTrain, as well as the design, installation, and integration of all the electrical systems, such as power, telecommunications, and our automatic train control. So the RFQ is the first step in a 2-step process. Following the close of each of these, shortlisting takes place, and for up to 3 respondents to advance to our request for proposal stage. So just last month in January, we announced the 2 shortlisted candidates to our first contract for Guideway, and we're now in the RFP stage. We're looking forward to announcing this successful proponent later this year. And we're also close to shortlisting our respondents for the second and the third contracts over the next few months. We're very pleased to be where we are today. The SkyTrain's been a long time coming since it was identified by the Mayor's Council as a priority transit route. We know that through our public and stakeholder engagement, that the people in the Township of Langley are eager for opening day. We can't wait for that as well. So, still fresh into our new year, it's incredible to reflect on the magnitude of our progress last year. From the design development of the full SkyTrain extension at over 16 kilometers, incorporation of active transportation elements and transit-oriented development, the signing of agreements such as the overarching supportive policy agreement with our project partners, approval of our business case, initiation of our competitive procurement process, the start and the finish of some of our advanced works, ongoing engagements, our ESR process. It's been quite a year. And in 2023, it's been no different. As we head towards major construction in 2024, we have our work cut out for us with contract awards, a public art process for our new stations, ongoing advanced work, environmental work, and public engagement, and a multitude of other things. So with that, I want to thank you for your support for the project and the opportunity to provide you with this update. We at the province are excited to be delivering such a transformative infrastructure project that really will reshape transit in the region and stimulate opportunities for housing, employment, and active transportation. I look forward to providing you with updates on the project as we continue to advance, and I'm very happy to respond to any questions you may have right now. Thank you.
I have a couple questions from council, and then I'll have one as well. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'm wondering, are all 8 stations going to have elevators?
Oh, certainly, yes.
Are they going to have more than one elevator? Because when the regularly scheduled elevator goes down and is single one, then it disables the ability for persons with disabilities to, so are they going to have 2 or 1?
Some will have 2, some will have 1. It depends on the design of the station. With regards to number of elevators and the way we design them, we follow the TransLink guidelines for the design guidelines for their stations that are closely tied to their accessibility standards. We are providing provision for future elevators in a couple of stations as a result of those discussions with TransLink.
Are you going to be looking at increasing the ability for people with things like e-bikes, e-scooters, and ordinary bikes to be able to take them on the SkyTrain? It's very limited right now if you can take them. You've got lots of storage and stuff like that, but with the increase in e-scooters especially, I'm anticipating a lot of people are going to want to take them on and off. And are you looking at increasing the ability to take that kind of transportation onto the SkyTrain?
Yeah, thank you. The operation of the SkyTrain itself and those decisions about what they allow on and off is really a TransLink decision. So in the design of the stations, we're certainly taking into account all of the guidelines that TransLink has in their stations. Unfortunately, I'm not aware. We could certainly get that information and get back to you on what TransLink's plans are for e-scooters and whether they're planning to change anything, but that's really an operations question.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about planning. You got to be able to get them up and down, and using the elevators. I have disabled persons in my family, and know that sometimes getting on the elevators can be a real pain. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
I appreciate it, and thanks for the presentation today. I'm looking forward to the day when my trip to UBC won't take 3 hours. So in regards to the design of the station, I know that obviously this project's being delivered by the province now, and TransLink with their mandate of redevelopment being a priority to generate ongoing revenue. I'm curious if the 196th Street station, like especially the bus exchange, and I'm thinking of the example at UBC and in Lonsdale where they've actually developed the exchange and above it. Is it being designed with that in mind? So could we at some point see the actual exchange itself have something above it so that we have transit-oriented development integrated right into the station?
Yeah, currently we've worked very closely with TransLink on the design of that station, obviously, of the bus exchange, to make sure that it will have the capacity to deal with whatever TransLink's planning in the future in terms of bus service. With regards to transit-oriented development, we haven't had any engagement with TransLink. It's not an area that it's not a location that TransLink is looking at in terms of future development. But as you know, the province does have initiatives in that regard. But specifically, right now, we're not designing anything in. It's hard to do that until you know what sort of development comes, but it certainly doesn't preclude things like that happening in the future.
Awesome, thank you. I just had one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
I know that part of the reason why the contracts and the procurement contracts were split up was to try and assist more local companies being able to actually participate in the construction of the project. And as much as you can speak to an ongoing RFP and RFQ process, have you seen that as a result of the new kind of breakdown into 3 as opposed to larger contracts as is typically been
Well,
done?
as you know, we shortlisted the successful proponents that would move to the RP stage for the Guideway contract in January, and we had two respondents that made it through to the next stage. We probably haven't had as much response as we were expecting for that contract. I can't speak to the other ones yet, but mainly it has to do with the amount of construction that's going on in the market these days. We did we've been doing market sounding for probably 2 years in preparation for this project, and we were, very close ties with the contractors in terms of what they're looking for a project like this and what would make it attractive to them from a competitive point of view. But I think the reality is there is just a lot of projects out there, and a lot of the contractors are at capacity. So,
Okay,
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just to go beyond that, actually, my question was more in regards to if you can let us know approximately how many, like you're shortlisting to two proponents, or applicants. How many have you shortlisted from? Are we talking? Was there only 2 people who submitted, and so therefore there's only 2 shortlisted, or are we getting enough competitive bids on things like this?
I can't speak in a lot of detail about
No,
that.
obviously
but,
not.
We will shortlist up to 3, but obviously a certain number of people respond, and then you have an evaluation process. It's not necessarily people that respond make it through the evaluation, but
You can't give kind of numbers. Like, are we talking like 5 people applied or 5 companies applied and you're shortlisting, or
I can't
I'm just
really.
okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I can say, as I said before, that the market is really competitive, and despite our best efforts, didn't see the number of respondents for the Guideway contract that we thought we would. But when we followed up with the market, that's the answer. It's just as you've heard everywhere. There's a lot of construction work going on. People
I'm
are
in
struggling
construction,
to
so I'm
find
well
people.
aware.
Yeah.
So that's why I was kind of more curious to know on these bigger contracts if there is a lot of people to pool from.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for coming today. I think I'm looking down the chambers here, and if I may, through the chair of the mayor, and I'm looking. I'm probably the only one left. I've worked with 6 mayors, and it wasn't the first mayor that said it was looking for the SkyTrain. Certainly, a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So I mean, we have been waiting a while. I know that had it not been for a decision made by Surrey a few years ago, we'd still be waiting. And I guess that's information. What my questions are, I mean, Councillor Pratt has indicated, things are changing even faster than even when you began the project, and about what the provincial government is doing. And and also in densities and land use. Have you got enough land in both the 203rd and the 196 to take into consideration more density or a very density for the future? If I may, through a chair.
Yeah, if I understand your question is, do we have enough land for the transit stations and exchanges to take into account the future development that might be built around the stations? Yes.
Well, and or used by the actual existing land, as Councillor Pratt and others have been indicating, going up.
Yes, we've taken into account adjacencies and how stations and exchanges will be integrated in the future. So that a couple of our stations in Surrey, for example, at 152, we know that's an area of high density that's probably going to come very quickly. So we've done things there to account for that. At 203, we've spent a fair amount of time with the City of Langley with their plans to make sure that whatever we're doing at the station and exchange accounts for what it's going to look like 30, 40, 50 years from now, making sure the stations can still work. And similar at 196. I mean, the ridership projections that we use make sure that that happens. Have we actually pre-proofed the stations for development? Is that you mean? Like, could you, if we put structure in where you build over top? No, we haven't done that. It's difficult and expensive to do and isn't always an effective way if you don't know what the development's going to look like. But there's certainly, we've looked at enough, we've designed the stations well enough and the exchanges that it doesn't preclude those types of things from happening in the future.
Yeah, I guess my only point, things are changing so fast.
Yeah,
I mean, who
they are.
knows? The federal government might even come in and do something. Okay, so my main question is based on, you're talking about 2028, you're talking about 2050. I mean, between 2028 and 2050, would you or your powers that be consider putting some sort of a future spur line that would go more into the township of Langley? As you know, we have one station. Surrey might have a few, township cities got one. So that would be one thing. I know that you or the powers that be, your board or the people accountable to their board, consider something in the future for a spur line into maybe the township going up to the Langley Event Center or some other dense areas.
Yeah, I think decisions like that, as you're aware, projects like this are delivered by Transportation Investment Corp, which is the delivery arm of the Ministry of Transportation. The decisions of where these lines go comes from TransLink and the Mayor's Council. So I think
right.
any decisions for spurs, coming off of this line in the future would come through that process, through their 10-year plans.
Yeah, because I must be a newcomer, because it seems like a long time between 2020 and 2050. But it might not be that long. Okay, my main question is there any thought from your end, your guideline stations and track, about phasing the system in? And what I mean is where you're starting off in Surrey and heading towards 196, you're crossing railroad tracks. That takes time, energy, effort, mostly time, of phasing that in and getting to 196 and then obviously building, but that's going to take longer. Have you thought about that at all, or just going to put one project and hit a button and start it?
We did actually look in the business case, we looked at phasing it, so doing 2 stages instead of 1, but found that doing it that way would actually extend the end game by 2 years, and the whole thing would probably cost about $500 million more. So it was discarded pretty early. It's much more efficient to do it as one. And the way these things are built, using one contractor, it makes more sense. But ultimately, it was 2 years of savings and $500 million of savings. So,
how many? You don't build over that many railroad tracks, do you?
Just the one, yeah. Just
no,
the one.
and even of your whole lines.
Our other lines?
Yeah,
I think
what I'm trying to do is just, sorry for interrupting. Is when I think about it, we built a number of overpasses over here because of the coal trains and things like that. I didn't think they were ever going to get those things built. They take a long time. I just wanted you to think about that, that's all.
Thank you.
That was my only question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So could you go back to slide 3? So,
3? Yep.
yeah, I just wanted to clear something up, and I think it's great that you're here. And again, thank you for coming and refreshing my memory. Of course, I think I've seen this presentation a few times, but I think it's great for council to see this. I've had people, and I don't think it matters who, suggest to me that somehow crossing the agricultural land reserve to get from 166 to 184th is a structural and construction challenge that has not been fully investigated and accounted for. I think you probably have heard this kind of commentary yourself. You're nodding, yeah. So,
Yes.
so I think you know where I'm going with this. There's somehow a suggestion that this is going to result in some major cost overruns. Maybe you could elaborate or
Yeah, certainly.
respond to that.
No, happy to respond to that. Yes, we are, as you may be well aware, that the ground conditions in the agricultural land reserve are very poor. We knew this going in. There had been some, back in 2017, some geotechnical work. When we started the project, we've done 2 years actually of geotechnical drilling fully along the alignment and some very specific drilling in the agricultural land reserve to make sure that we have a good understanding of the soil conditions there, which are quite poor. The piles, when we build the guideway through there, the piles may go down 40 to 90 meters depth to hit the hard ground. More recently, I don't know if for those of you who drive Fraser Highway very recently, you may have noticed on the south side this summer, just to the east of the golf course, we ran a test pile. So this again is a test you do where we actually pile down to the hard ground in that very deep area to get some data that you can then pass on to the contractors who give better certainty. So we've done, I think we've done a good job of determining what the soils look like there. We're going in with our eyes open of what they're like. We have some data to give to our contractors and offering opportunities for our contractors to do further work before they put their bids in an effort to try and keep those risk costs that they might be padding the bids with down. So will it be challenging? Yes, but I feel that we've done a lot of advanced works to try and get a good handle on it and to pass that information to the contractors so they're more comfortable with it as well.
I think the concern, I mean, if you can build the tallest building in the world on sand, I'm assuming you can figure this out. But the question that I think has come up is concern, of course, with some of Langley's history around some other projects, that if their cost overruns are substantial, that the stations past 184th would be sacrificed to complete the project within budget. Is there any possibility of that?
There is no possibility that I have heard of about that. And we do have contingency built in for these types of things, not just geotechnical concerns, but utility concerns. But it's never been contemplated to talk about cutting off the ends. Yeah.
That's great. So I appreciate your presentation. I see no other questions from council. And again, thank you for making the trip out here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to reports to council, item E1. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by somebody. Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion on E1? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E1. That carries unanimously. Move on to E2. So I'm going to, just to slow this one down a little bit, rather than calling for a motion for the whole item, I would like to call for a motion to the first item, simply to adopt the updated policy document as attachment A. No, we don't. We'll just do it individually, Councillor Ferguson. So if I can just get a motion to only adopt the policy update as attachment A. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on the policy document which has been presented to council? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the policy. That carries unanimously. So now moving on to paying for it. I would like to suggest some options here, that we move again this separately rather than trying to struggle with division on the recommendation motion. So I'd like to see if anybody would contemplate moving that council pre-approved 2.1 million in the 2023 transportation capital budget funding by itself. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Van Popta. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Rint seconded that. So on just that portion of the recommended motion, Councillor Pratt.
Just wondering what the rationale for that separation would be.
Well, I think speaking only to the first part, the goal here, I think, is to have giving the council the ability to weigh in separately on the capital proposal as recommended by staff versus the operating additions proposal by staff.
Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question on the first portion of E2. Well, I canceled the vote accidentally, so we're going to call that question again. E2. First portion. Second vote on E2. That also carries unanimously. So if someone now would like to move the remainder of the recommended motion regarding the proposed operating additions. Councillor Rint moves that. Is there a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, just wondering if, and it might be premature, but since we're not going for pre-approval, as I understand it, on this portion, what the tax implications might be for that being now embedded in the operating budget.
So Mr. Ruff can certainly answer that, but the 560 proposed here to be within 2023 would be
Pre-approved, yes, the 2024.
would be to combine together. I believe that would add up to about 1.7. Ms. Ruff can calculate, but I think that'd be roughly 1.4%. Ms. Ruff, do you want to confirm the proposed tax increases?
Yeah, that would be about accurate.
Okay, about there. So
Thank you.
potential solution to this. So I am going to move a deferral of this to the first council meeting in September. Do I have a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on the deferral to the first meeting in September? Seeing none, I'll call the question on that deferral. That carries unanimously. Okay, moving on now to item E3, soil deposit application at 27575 8th Avenue. Is there I see somebody speaker. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. Just wondering, it's notwithstanding the fact that based on the public support threshold, this application did meet that. Was there any reason in regards to drainage or runoff, any concern like that that staff had that might mean that council shouldn't refer this application forward to the ALC?
Go ahead.
Your Worship, no, the issue was the policy threshold was not met. We're also pointing out for this motion, there hasn't been a mover and seconder yet.
There has been no motion moved or seconded yet, so I'll allow some questions to staff prior to entertaining what version of a not refer or refer to entertain.
And then just as a follow-up question
Go
to
ahead.
that,
Yep.
through yourself to staff, if council were to refer it to the ALC, obviously the property immediately to the east, that's in the city of Abbotsford. And so I'm just curious to know that if, notwithstanding the ESG work that's been done, ESC work that's been done and all the drainage work that's been done, would the township be liable for any future damage or any concern on the city of Abbotsford side?
Mr. Bracken?
No, that would be a matter of the standards employed by the professionals. So as long as it's a council or a government body exercising its discretion in a quasi-judicial fashion as we're doing here, it would be appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah,
Any
so,
questions to staff? Do you have any questions to staff, or you wish to move a motion?
yeah,
Either one.
okay. So I am going to ask to refer this. Can I speak to it first?
Which version? Are you not referring, or are you referring?
Oh, I would like to refer this motion until after March when we can get a presentation from staff on the current policy. And
So if you're looking to do that, why don't you move the recommendation, and then I'll take a referral of the recommendation motion when you do that.
sure.
So you want to move the recommendation motion? Is there a seconder to the recommendation?
Is the recommendation not that we do not refer it to
Yeah,
the ALC?
but we'll deal with that. Is there a seconder to the recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Bailey, so go ahead. So now if you wish to the recommendation is now moved and seconded. If you wish to refer that for a presentation.
Yeah,
I
I'd
would
like to
take that
refer this
So
application.
you're moving referral. Is there a seconder to the referral? Seconded by Councillor Kuntz, so go ahead, to the referral.
Okay. So, like Council Pratt, I'm concerned that we're not giving this applicant an opportunity to go before the actual governing body of ALR lands. And that appears to be based on a policy that was made, I believe, under the last council. So in this case, only 21% of the responded to this mail out, which is a very low threshold of opinions to govern whether this application should move to the ALC. So for that reason, I would like to move that we refer this until to get a presentation, possibly in the March meeting, just to get background on this policy.
Well, Mr. Backen, I think there might be some interest from what I'm gathering. The intent here is to get a presentation on the policy. I think it'd be the third or fourth staff have provided over the years. I think it's important that we go over it again. I think the intent here is to review that policy, get some information on that policy, understand the rationale for recommendation to not refer it, and then have council consider it then.
With possible policy revisions, I take it, Your Worship?
Potentially, I would assume that that may be under consideration from some members of council, yeah. That good, Councillor Van Popta?
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Pratt on the referral?
On the referral, I'm just curious if the intention of Council Van Popta would be to, at this time, based on the fact that it seems that this application, the only reason we would not refer it to the ALC is just because of that policy, if the intention would be to have this actually go to the ALC as well as get a presentation after the fact on that policy.
I'm going to clarify, though, that council cannot refer based on any criteria it sees fit. And so it wouldn't have to be necessarily based or not based on the policy itself. But I understand that that's the intent is to have a look at the policy prior to rendering a decision on this application. But the policy doesn't necessarily have to be a basis to make a decision.
Correct, yeah, that's the part embedded in this policy is that we don't have to follow it if we so choose based on the support threshold. So I'm just wondering if that's the only reason to hold up this application going and having their day before the ALC, if there'd be interest in.
I'm sure there's many criteria that all members of council are considering, not just one. Councillor Pratt. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
I think as part of that presentation, I'd be interested to know in why maybe there were 3 that were not in support, and I guess I'm concerned that maybe it would impact their property, or maybe they're not. So if that was part of the presentation, I was just wondering if through your worship to staff that could be.
Yeah, do you want to get some clarification, Mr. Backen, on what Councillor Kuntz might be looking for?
Mr. Zwag, was it there? It may also have been there was not a response, because I believe that we take non-responses as being negative, but perhaps you can elaborate on this current question.
I believe non-responses are ignored, Mr. Backen, for the sole.
The 26 not responding.
Thank you, through your worship. Indeed, there was a number of non-responses that indicated, but the 3 that voted in opposed, there was no reason provided. But of course, the public at any time can provide additional information on any application.
And can you
We
just
have not received those.
you just confirm for council, though, that the non-responses are not tallied, like an LAS, for example?
That is correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
So seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on the referral. That carries unanimously. So I'm going to move on to reports to council E4, Willoughby Greenway amenity policy, to approve the new Willoughby Greenway amenity policy, which consolidates 8 policies down into 1. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Van Popta, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on E4? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E4. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. Rezoning application number 100567, bylaw number 5826. This is for 127 apartment units and 42 townhouse units. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to approve this application for now because I realize that this applicant has been working on this prior to this council term. With that said, as we concentrate our increased densification on the 200th Street corridor, that I want to start seeing developments and staff to be more creative with some mature tree retention on easy lots like this. This is a large rectangle treed lot. There's so many ways that we can develop this lot while maintaining some mature tree spanses. So I'll be working with staff to guide our development community to do better with their site plans to retain clusters on their lots. So just consider this more of a heads up.
Okay, Mr. Backen, I don't know if you want to comment on some of the history, but I am hearing some members of council that would like to start to consider how some other members of the region are potentially preserving some significant trees within the development process. So I think that is a good heads up, but I think I agree with Councillor Van Popta that this one is well advanced and complies with the OCP. Seeing no other discussion on G1, I'll call the question on G1. Carries unanimously. And we'll move on to G2, Tree Protection Bylaw Update 2023. Bylaw number 5838, 5841, and 5842. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Kunst. Is there a seconder to this? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion? Here we are. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to staff, Question in regard to the cash in lieu program that this amendment is discussing. I'm just curious if the township is obligated, similar in the sense of when we collect DCCs, we have a statutory obligation to spend those DCCs on what they were collected for. And obviously this cash in lieu would likely go into a fund that the township has to plant trees. Now, is there another mechanism that the township could use to plant trees besides this fund? Does that money have to go into this, or is there kind of creative ways and different programs that could be implemented with the money that's collected from that program?
Bracken?
While some caution needs to be exercised, I guess I would answer the question by saying there are creative ways to repurpose funding, but one must be careful and respect the original terms from which it was collected. But if the council has the ultimate unfettered discretion, so if there's a way to link it perhaps from the current to the proposed, whatever that may be, subject to a bit of a technical review, it can be done, but it must be done cautiously.
Appreciate it.
Councilor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to vote on it for now, but for February 27th, I would like to see a memo to council on significant range of options on raising the fees and splitting off building envelope from driveway and septic. I think that those are kind of two different animals that warrant possibly two different fee structures. I'd like to see us be a little bit firmer on increasing those fees to help inspire people to retain more trees. At the current $500 a tree, I don't think that there's much incentive to do that. Also, a previous meeting that we were talking about this tree bylaw, Councillor Martin brought up a good point regarding nuisance trees, dangerous trees to foundations and roofs. And if we could add that in the next go round, that if for whatever reason we kind of missed having it added to this policy or to this bylaw, in the case of trees that are affecting foundations, driveways, or roofs.
Mr. Bracken, I don't know if we can, so I think the goal here is to get some additional information while allowing this to proceed and to the 27th for final adoption, but maybe make some final tweaks at the end of this month or near the end of this month. And so if that could be potentially structured in a memo into the distribution to inform some members of council that may want to follow up with some proposed amendments on the 27th, just to give you some context, I believe that's the intent. So there could be some ideas presented, to send to council throughout the next 10 days or so. Is that something you think is achievable?
Be towards the latter of the 10 days, but I think we can come up with something that would at least address the three issues, being the raising the fees, the envelope being split from driveways and buildings, and as well nuisance trees and dangerous trees.
I think maybe if that could be provided on the Thursday distribution when the next agenda comes out, potentially that would give enough time for members of council to consider some additional submissions from staff and the public. But I think the intent is to keep this moving forward. That's not
I don't want to halt it, but we need to add it.
Yeah, great. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, before we ask that, just a housekeeping, that would be the mayor's memo for the 27th rather than a notice of motion for the
No, it
council?
would be, I think, a memo to council from
Okay,
staff.
that's through the mayor's office.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
taking
that's
some
what I was
comment.
double checking procedurally. Second thing is really quick question, if I may, through the chair to staff. Bullet point 4, and I guess related to other points of the report, the undue hardship, that's for folks waiting for our staff, because they're busy, to get back on smaller issues and items that they wouldn't have had to do otherwise, if I may, through the chair.
Thank you, through your worship. The existing bylaw has a undue hardship provision which allowed residents or applicants to approach a township to be able to remove a tree that may not have fit perfectly in any of the categories, such as a building envelope and those kind of items. So we are now proposing to remove that undue hardship requirement, an option, and have a more prescriptive bylaw for the different types of trees that are being contemplated for removal.
Thank you. Just supplemental question, if I may, through a chair. Would that also involve bullet point 1, where you're talking about something in driveways and outbuildings and things like that, if I may?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. We have a slide that may provide some clarity.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, it's just the mouse. Thank you.
That's in the report too, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the proposed amendments to the bylaw essentially will result in 4 paths for, depending on what the tree is. As we talk about, if the tree is dead or dying, all that is required is photographic evidence, no application fee, no permit fee, no arborist report, no cash from you. If we're then talking about those conflicts that we had with building permits, driveways, we are requiring an application fee, permit fee, and a cash from you, but no arborist report. And then when we talked earlier about the protected tree that's inappropriate for their species, size, and location, that was indeed meant for possible damages to foundations, to roof lines, so that was intended to capture that process, which would be required to be supported by an arborist report. And then in very rare circumstances, if the tree was cut illegally or without a permit, we would again ask for everything except for an arborist report. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you,
Ferguson.
thank you, Mr. Zweig. And it's to say that it was in the report, it's just that the reason why question was for the hardship. So you answered that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I'm obviously glad to see this here and look forward to getting it finalized. I guess one of my questions to staff would be, how will this and how long will it take before we see the backlog sort of lifted and maybe, also will we need to still hire staff, more staff to sort of administer this tree protection bylaw, or will this help?
Bracken or Mr. Zweig?
Thank you, through your worship. I guess two questions. First of all is to do with the backlog. When this amended bylaw is adopted by council, then staff will work diligently to go through all of the existing applications. And we are intending to reach out to all in-stream processes to see which of the applicants could want to go through the new process, which is a much more streamlined process. So we're hoping to really catch up on the backlog. Because of the existing in-stream application, we're allow people to do their own replacement trees. We still are kind of somewhat bound by having that requirement. So there's a bit of administrative work to catch up on all of the workload. With respect to the additional staff member, even with the amendments to the bylaw, staff is still recommending one new arborist to support this bylaw. The other arborists we have currently on staff are also supporting other urban forestry programs. So in addition, one more regular full-time position is needed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bracken, I also, before we call the question here, I had one other request from staff to distribute to council also on that Thursday. A copy of the proposed tree protection bylaw as revised. So the bylaw was an amendment bylaw, which is fine, but I would like to have council have the opportunity to see the tree protection bylaw with the revisions highlighted for an easy reference to what is being changed, for that to be reviewed prior to final adoption. Mr. Bracken, you don't think you need a motion for that? I think you can supply that. That's great. So with that, I'll call the question on G2. That carries unanimously. Moving on to G3, Initial Development Application Procedure Improvements Bylaw, number 5839. I'm going to move this. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Sorry, just one quick clarification. I would like to just make sure that, I think it's page 3, when it talks about distribution to council for the applications, that can we just make sure that it's a separate DL package and not lumped into the current DL package, and like make a separate Skookum applications that have
Yeah, I
come
believe
through?
there's a number of improvements underway, but we wanted to pass these forms on to the development industry to get more housing in the pipeline. Mr. Richardson, do you want to supply some context for some of your thoughts around procedure here?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Van Topta. Yeah, we can certainly do that. That was an interim measure mentioned in the bylaw amendments there. We are working diligently with our colleagues in IT to have an automated system that would provide more information and timely information to council as well as the general public, which are go towards our goals of transparency and timeliness as well.
Great. So I'm going to thank the staff and the senior management here for bringing this forward as quickly as it has been brought forward. There's been some great meetings and some great discussions on the intent here of these development application procedure improvements to essentially unwind some of the very significant engineering requirements simply to have the application considered by the public and considered by council. We're not engineers. We're not putting the pipes in the ground. We're not reviewing those kinds of details. I think it's very helpful for the public and the development industry and get more housing done and to consider some very timely, maybe appropriate amendments on the 200th Street corridor and other corridors with minimal cost and time to bring those forward and have those considered. That's a significant, in my opinion, significant improvement to the process to allow the public also to weigh in, where the proponent won't be as resistant to making alterations given the time and the amount of money that may have been invested into the application. So I view this as a very positive step in the right direction. And with that, I will call the question on G3. That carries unanimously. Going to move on to G4, Township of Langley Emergency Bylaw Update, Bylaw number 5845. You can get a motion, please. It's moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion on G4? You have, go ahead, Councillor Van Popta.
Just housekeeping. Item 3.1, there's a typo. It has bullet point A and bullet point C, I believe, but we're missing B. So just clean that up. And I just had a general question on 6.3. Talks about the people who can actually invoke the Emergencies Act, and I was just wondering, just out of curiosity, if there's who has ultimate say. Like, there's 3 different people. What if 2 say no and 1 says yes? Like, how does that play out? Just more.
Mr. Bracken,
just wanting to kind of ask.
Outline some of the process for activating the bylaw.
Yeah, stepping back a little bit, ultimately, there has to be a resolution passed by council to enact the entire operation, to declare an emergency. What you're referencing is some of the language taken from the bylaws or from the statute itself. And in terms of that, I think any one person is sufficient to actually activate that initiative. So there would not be a disagreement. It would be the first in time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on G4. And that also carries unanimously. I'll move on to K, meetings of minutes. Get a motion, please, on K1. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion? I'm going to do these separately. Any discussion on the minutes, receiving the minutes from the Council Advisory Committee? Seeing none, I'll call the question on K1. That carries unanimously. K2, the recommended motion. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Kunst, do you want to second that? You want to second that? It's your committee. Okay, can move seconded by Councillor Kunst. The recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee. Is there any discussion on K2? Seeing none. Another question. That carries unanimously. We move on to L1. Is there a mover? I'll move it. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on the minutes from the SD 35 Liaison Committee? Seeing none, I'll call the question on L1. Councillor Pratt. Carries unanimously. Mayor and Council report. Is there any Mayor and Council reports? Come on, there's got to be some. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Very recently, there was a very difficult call for emergency services, and that's both police and fire. And I really, as a trained peer diffuser in my prior career, I want to personally thank Acting Chief Bruce Ferguson for the care that he exhibited towards the fire staff. And in this example, it is something that I believe from my experience an awful lot of chiefs would not do. So thank you very much, Chief, for taking care of your staff. And I believe the same is true, I can't speak as fully about the RCMP, but I also understood the RCMP handled this very difficult call with an awful lot of class and care towards their members. So thank you to those two.
Yeah, I concur. I think we definitely concur. Councillor Ferguson.
Okay. First of all, we had our first Metro Vancouver Indigenous Relations. We're under
Mayor and Council report.
Okay.
I'll give you a second speaking opportunity for Metro Vancouver.
I'll go on Mayor and Council.
Okay.
Mayor and Council, I had the opportunity, as other council members as well, of attending a sustainability conference in Ottawa. with the Federation of Canadian Municipality, FCM, and it was a very, very informative. And I think what I can take away from that is the importance of environmental issues, importance of carbon and zero build and zero this and that, and how we move ahead in the future as we change, and we're making changes all the time. Also, Ottawa is a very interesting place, being the nation's capital, and had the opportunity to explore a number of museums. If you're there, you might as well take advantage of it. So it was a very informative and I thought worthwhile trip. I've been on many trips in my career, and this certainly tops it. Thank you.
Thank you. So under mayor report, I'm going to do one a quarter. So I'm going to do one at the end of March. But I am going to announce something. I'm going to announce right now, and the press release has gone out, that under the community charter, as the mayor, I am establishing a standing committee on police priorities and initiatives within the Township of Langley. The composition of the committee will include myself and 2 appointed councillors, Councillor Martins and Councillor Bailey, as well as the Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Backen, the officer in charge of the Langley Detachment, Superintendent Adrian Marsden, and Operations Officer Inspector Steve Wade. This was brought to me as a suggestion by Councillor Martin, so I want to thank you for that. And I will also be asking that the committee appoint Councillor Martins as the chair of that committee. The purpose is to significantly start and to continue to improve the communication between the Township of Langley and the Langley of RCMP on par with what we see and have heard about in other growing municipalities such as ours, especially as the Township of Langley moves forward towards its contemplated deintegration still being considered by council. And this does not preclude the OIC from presenting to council at council meeting from time to time in any way, shape, or form, but this will be to allow some members of council report back to council, but also work closely with improving and working hard on the communication between the Langley RCMP and the Township of Langley Council, which I believe is long overdue. So with that, Councillor Ferguson, I'll move on to Metro Vancouver and Regional Committee Representatives Report. Do you have anything?
Of course I do.
Okay, you might want to press your button, please.
The light hasn't come on.
Yeah, I'll just put it on. There you go. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Well, first of all, before I say anything, I'll congratulate you and the committee yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Bailey, and certainly Councillor Martin for being the chair. And the first thing came to my mind, even right now, is Langley to work towards being one of the safest communities in the province, if not the country. So, but on another note, as I did want to say that we met for the first time, the Metro Vancouver Indigenous Relations Committee, and the board has appointed me to treaty table again, and so I thank them very much. I really appreciate the time and energy I spend on that committee. And a chair of the committee, Sab Dhaliwal, was appointed to the UBCM Indigenous Committee. So that, and also to continue on, there will be, and I can't say it today, we'll hopefully be able to announce it either next meeting or the meeting after, will be the naming of another park in the region, an Indigenous name. So I will keep everybody posted on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no other reports, I'm going to move on to items from prior meetings. This one is Council Code of Conduct requirement being brought forward from the January 26, 2023 meeting as 01. Councillor Martins, do you want to just take this over and press to speak? Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the clerk for bringing this deferred motion back onto the agenda.
Believe it's just back on the floor. Ms. Bowers, want to clarify that. So there's no, you can make whatever.
It is a live motion, as it was just deferred.
Deferred, that's correct. Just want to clarify, you don't have to, you can just go ahead, and seeing no other speakers, you can just make your amendment as well. Okay. Go ahead.
Go on. So I'd like to propose an amendment that provides some direction based on this. The current council policy 01025 titled Code of Ethics, Conduct, Confidentiality, and Conflict of Interest for council members and appointees does include a code of ethics and conduct expectations. However, to ensure that the township policy is exceeding the community charter requirements, I'd like to make an amendment in the motion providing direction to specifically amend section 3.1.1.1 of policy 01025 to read, maintain the highest ideals of honor, integrity, respect, and accountability, and discharge public duties in a manner that is fair, honest, professional, and responsible.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. You want to discuss it, or does it speak for itself?
It speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself. I would say that it does. I do want to clarify, Ms. Bauer, that this amendment will satisfy the provincial requirement.
The provincial requirement is not prescriptive. It just directed that council should discuss it and determine if they had one. And by making this amendment, you were determining you have one.
So it satisfies the.
I believe that would fulfill the requirement.
That's excellent. So with that, I'll call the question. Oh, you got to push your button, Councillor Ferguson.
The button.
Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Now, was this an actual amendment or an actual motion?
It was moved. It was moved and seconded as recommended by staff. And this direction, this amendment would provide staff with the direction.
So it's actually a motion rather than an
There's
amendment?
already, Ms. Bauer, do you want to clarify the process for Councillor Ferguson?
The motion is still active from the last meeting as it was deferred. So essentially what we've done is amend the final paragraph of the motion, which read that council provides staff with direction, and then take that out and put in the direction we were given.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just want to clarify.
That's great. No, that's excellent. Thanks, Ferguson. I appreciate that. Seeing no other discussion on 01, I'll call the question. And that carries unanimously. And move on to other business. Q1, Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll move the motion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
We need the main motion as amended on that last
Main
one.
motion is amended. Okay, I will clear the queue. Yeah, you were, Councillor Ferguson, but you didn't say anything. So, okay. So I'll call the question. Where are we back here again? 01. Yeah, I know. There we go. There you go. And that carries unanimously. Main motion is amended. That won't happen again. I'm going to move on to Councillor Kuntz. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move the motion.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in the last couple of weeks ago, when we talked about cannabis, we heard a lot of people who are really uncomfortable with having a cannabis location so close to a school. I've personally heard from a lot of people who are also as concerned about having a vape store so close to high schools, elementary schools. So that's the reason for the motion. And I don't have any more comments. So.
Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I get a little bit concerned. I mean, this is, I think, how do I say this? That we're kind of picking apart different parts of our policies and bylaws. And I was wondering if there's just an appetite to maybe review all restricted items like alcohol sales and cannabis and vaping, the things that are restricted to underage, and just do one combined kind of review on our policies regarding that. Because I understand, I agree with Councillor Kuntz, but I just wonder, what if somebody now wants to do an application for an alcohol establishment there? So I just think that if we just review the whole thing at once, it might prevent more work later on.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a substantial change versus maybe another motion to add to it, but we can certainly consider that if you want me to come back to you. Councillor Kuntz is asking to speak again. Councillor Kuntz?
Yeah, I guess with specific to vape, I don't think there is any sort of anything that says now that can't be a vape store. So it's not that I'm trying to add more or whatever. I think if we're going to go down the route of cannabis, do we already have, our liquor stores not already sort of have some of that criteria already wrapped around that?
There is a process for those, Mr. Bracken. Maybe you want to just give council that information.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a process for liquor stores. There's also a process for liquor primaries. So those would be pubs and whatnot. As you're aware, there's the policy or the approach for cannabis, which is under reconsideration. And at this point, as far as we know, there's nothing under the vaping provision. So this would be in addition to its own regulatory structure for vaping.
Yeah, just to clarify, Mr. Bracken, the cannabis policy was directly amended. I don't believe there's any pending work on that. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
we did the work and it's done, unless a member of council brings forward another change. So I would kind of concur, Councillor Kuntz, so the suggestion there is that we have a process for cannabis and for liquor. And liquor
Yeah.
stores and liquor primary, and you're looking to add a process for vape. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
because I think vape is something that maybe we've only seen in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. And I think it's even probably, I don't know if it's dying now. I don't see it as much, but I just, that was my only reason to bring it forward, just to say, hey, like maybe we don't need to have a vape store there either.
Mr. Bracken, I mean, a similar option would be to maybe have come back, I don't think it needs to be amended, but have come back an option to simply not allow them. And that would certainly be simple and very, very, very simplistic versus creating a process and a policy and locations and criteria. One option for council would be to simply not permit them. Is that an option for council to look at?
It could be if we could determine that we have the regulatory ability to prohibit.
Yeah.
Quite often, we have to actually dance down that division of prohibit versus regulate.
Yeah.
And this process we know would be safe. There may be very few stores that would actually meet the criteria, but there would still be the ability to regulate as opposed to prohibit.
So this would be a report to council that could outline that for council. Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Councillor Kuntz for bringing this forward. It's certainly an emerging issue, as you mentioned, Councillor Kuntz, in the last number of years. And I think with emergent issues, we do need to investigate this a little further and ensure that we're taking the right steps for this. There are growing health implications and concerns that I think warrants that this be dealt with further. And I appreciate the request for a staff report, and I would support that.
Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. Just as part of the report when it comes back, I'm thinking specifically of sites down in Brookswood, because I know that if we set a distance parameter from schools, for instance, there might be one that could be, already within that, and what challenges the township would face if we say, well, within this diameter or radius from a school, you're not allowed to operate, but there's one already operating there, and what impact that might have, and how we might go about either addressing that or not addressing that.
I think Mr. Bracken has that. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on Q1. That carries unanimously. We'll move on to Q2, additional community amenity contributions payment flexibility. I'm going to move it. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on Q2. That carries unanimously. We'll move on to Q3, park upgrades for North Langley Diamond Sports. I'm going to move that. Is there seconded by Councillor Ferguson? Is there any discussion on Q3? Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed reading through it that I think in the past it was that Langley Lusa had made an offer to help with upgrading those facilities. Is that still on the table, or have they been contacted? Do they want to be part of this process?
This motion here is specific to that park location where Lusa does, I believe, have a field. Mr. Bracken, do you want to jump in here and give us some context? I do not believe Lusa would be directly involved in potentially this park upgrade, but I think there might be some discussions regarding their use of that location.
That's correct, Your Worship. We're in discussion with Lusa, at least the staff are, and part of the opportunity exists in terms of the new soccer campus and as well a reallocation or relocation of some of the existing fields. So in this regard, I don't suggest that we're going to preclude them from being there, but they may have a greater interest in focusing on the campus and in other satellite areas than having a number of, I guess, satellite facilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I would say that if we are expanding and they're going to, Lusa would operate the contemplated soccer campus next to the new middle school and high school for a specific age bracket, that potentially we could repurpose this space to create something similar for baseball and softball for Walnut Grove Senior Secondary. Does that be along the lines of what potentially could be looked at? So I believe that Lusa would definitely be involved in one of our long-term partners, along with North Langley Diamond Sports. Councillor Martins.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Woodward, for bringing this forward. Just a quick ask, if I may, through your worship, with regards to item number 2, the lighting schedule and provisions for user group activation access. In my conversations with some of the people in this user group, currently it's problematic if they're needing to extend the lights or change what's been scheduled, and my understanding is that's all through a company out of the States who actually are responsible for that, if that's correct. But I know that this is being worked on, but in the meantime, because they will have a whole nother season here lost while we're sorting this out, starting up again in the spring, if I think there's a code that they require that they could call this light operator directly. If that's available, if that's been offered, if we can do that, just to help them in the meantime until we sort out this list of items.
Now, Mr. Bracken, before you or anybody else weighs in, sorry, I just wanted to give it some context. So in some meetings with staff in preparing going over some work items underway and some other items contemplated, it was suggested that in the long term, A2 might be best provided for as a capital addition, not only for maybe this field, but some others. But in the interim, is there some other solution that we could potentially, because as of the moment, the complaint that Councillor Martins is rightly identifying is that maybe could be solved, but it may be too slow in terms of the timelines outlined here, where currently they are saying that some members drive away when they may take up to 10, 15, 20 minutes to get the lights turned on. So is there some interim solution that could be potentially outlined to council to a memo that could be followed up on, and then it could be contemplated as a capital program for a permanent solution? Is there some options there? Mr. Zweig, want to jump in?
Thank you, Your Worship. We can definitely prepare a memo with some options available. I know that access to codes, we always want to manage somewhat to make sure the right people have access to it, but we'll put our minds to a temporary solution.
Mr. Councilor Martins, does that work for you? Do you want to follow up more specifically?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so I wasn't trying to come up with an alternate solution for A2. This was just meant as an interim measure, and I appreciate you have to be careful with the access to codes, but if we could pick some key people in this user group, identify them and them only, I think that's a reasonable ask in the interim if we could do that.
Yes, can you take that under advisement, Mr. Swag? We can follow up, and also I agree that that is an issue. In some cases, it's listed here as a capital item, potentially looking at changing it from phone activation to some sort of on-site activation with secure access, which is why it was contemplated as a potential capital item. I'm going to call the question on Q3. That carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to Q4. I'm going to move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. I'm going to speak to this one a little bit before I'm labeled anti-cycling. The goal here is, for those that don't have the motion in front of them, this is in regards to a new cycling infrastructure improvements fund, where we have, in the last council, added a number of on-site cycling requirements for new development, which can be problematic for some some different residential forms, and in some cases, I think need some refinement, and then allowing for some potential redirection of those resources to a cycling infrastructure fund that I think would be more beneficial off-site, as well as providing for some on-site items. So that's the context for these. I'm going to highlight for council. It is a staff report to council with potential amendments. So there'll be plenty of time to review the bylaw and review the proposed changes in future meetings. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, I just want to thank Your Worship and Councillor Van Popta for bringing this forward. I think it's something that's definitely worth having a discussion about. And just out of curiosity, when we're talking about the cash in lieu portion of the motion, in discussions, because I'm assuming this was brought forward through discussions with proponents who've expressed some concerns.
And staff, there was quite a bit of background work done on this.
And so do we have an idea of what kind of cash we're actually going to be seeing out of a program like this?
So I think that's something that staff can come back with, report to council on. We have other cash in lieu provisions for amenity areas and other items, tree replacement. There's cash in lieu is quite well known and understood, and I think that this is being prescriptive in the sense that some portion of the requirements where they're quite onerous, say for example 400 or 500 apartments in a one high-rise structure, we're required to put in over 400 bicycling stalls, which I'm receiving feedback are becoming storage lockers or left vacant. They're all being required to be placed on the main P1 floor, consuming potential visitor parking or EV charging stations. And so I think this needs a second look, but take it very cautiously and slowly, that perhaps some of those requirements can be dialed back a little bit. But the goal is not to let people off of the requirements. The goal is to potentially redirect those costs over to public infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the goal. Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, I see this a bit as a housekeeping item, just, to review where current policies are and how they're working and how they're not working. I've had experience with, building a building that to this day still has, as your worship speaks to, vacant bike locker rooms. And, I think we were a bit of ahead of our time when we created this policy. And I do definitely still want to see cycling end of trip infrastructure in place. Obviously, we need to promote cycling. But there's also an opportunity and that we can actually capture some of this inefficiency as it currently is, and put it towards greater use for the cycling community. So I see this as a good step forward to reviewing our own self and looking in the mirror and making sure that we're doing things as the best practice.
I agree. I'm going to add to that a little bit too, before I hand it back to Councillor Pratt. So for example, Langley City requires 0.5 per residential unit. Surrey is at 1.2, but they allow some flexibility. It doesn't all have to be loaded on the ground floor. In some cases, Vancouver is requiring even less than we are in some scenarios. So I think that this needs a rethink, and I think it's an excellent addition, and I think our staff needs some assistance in giving them some direction on what we're looking for. And there's necessarily no urgency to this, but proponents should be aware that we're heading in this direction as well. And I think our staff can look at, given some time, can look at a more Township of Langley specific version of some of these requirements. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm curious, and again, it's report back to staff, so we'll get more information. And with the improvements fund, and it says specifically infrastructure improvements fund, obviously it'd be nice to catalyze a little bit of that cash to build some bike lanes and such. But is there thought to kind of mimicking what other jurisdictions around the world do in terms of potentially using some funds towards, we have EV rebates that we participate in through going back to the Clean BC fund with the province? Would there be any kind of interest in at least getting a report back to say, okay, this is how we maybe could utilize some of these funds to encourage people to actually get bicycles as opposed to just building the bike lanes?
So the fund itself, because again, the goal is not to take the requirements and give a freebie back to the development industry. We need cycling infrastructure. We need end-of-trip facilities. We need off-site and on-site amenities. So with the establishment of the cycling infrastructure fund, it could have multiple funding sources, and this would maybe only one. And once it's established, I think there would have to be a council discussion about what it's used for.
Okay.
Separate from this motion.
Good, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on Q4. And that carries unanimously. I'm going to move on to any more other business. Any other members of the council? Oh, number 5, I totally forgot. Sorry. Councillor Martins, I'm looking forward to the break. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this is for the notice of motion with regards to potential Hudson Bay Street safety improvements.
You going to move that?
Okay.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say we have received complaints from concerned residents on Hudson Bay Street. On this particular section of road, it's often used as a bypass to slower, more congested streets in the area. And really, at this point, it's just a staff report to provide possible solutions and moving towards an open house to further public discussion. I think it's a concern that warrants further investigation and conversations.
Great. I really appreciate this coming forward. I've heard the same concerns, and especially in regards to some of the development going on in that area, which is, I think, going to add to some of the residents' concerns. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on Q5. That carries unanimously. Is there any other business? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I have 2 items. There, in our distribution package, there's a letter from the FLCA regarding mosquitoes. I live in Fort Langley. Mosquitoes are a topic there. Are we bound by Metro Vancouver on the policies we have regarding mosquito control, or can we go beyond the Morrow recommendations?
I just want to just give council an update. I have asked for some memo to come forward regarding this.
It's in the package, the memo.
It is, yeah, so that's some follow-ups even in addition to that. But Mr. Zwag, do you want to give that some context?
Thank you, through your worship. The contractor is retained by Metro Vancouver to provide regional mosquito services, and Township, of course, is adhering to those. Based on the most recent communications from both residents, or one was FLCA, one's resident, is they would like to see some more early proactive works in the Fort Langley area. So that's something that we're going to take offline and see what we can do with Metro Vancouver and the subcontractor Morrow.
So that does go through, we are governed by Metro Van's rules on that?
Yeah, they are Metro Vancouver subcontractor. So again, we're just going to start looking at some of those requests that are coming in right now already in February.
Okay.
Okay.
And I have a second follow-up.
ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I made a notice of motion a couple meetings ago regarding the dredging of the Bedford Channel. Just wondering where we're at with that report, getting that we're coming into the spring
Zach,
season.
do you have a timeline on that one?
Mr. Zwag, do you have a timeline as to dredging of the Bedford Channel? Do we have to get back on that?
I believe Mr. Tulamella was taking the lead on that. I've not been involved.
We'll have to get back to you on that then. Mr. Tumello may have been taking the lead.
Is there a way that we can make sure that this is not, that this is an item that is given some attention given the state of the channel last year?
No, it's an interesting channel in that we're very close to being able to walking on water because you can get almost right across it. The challenge, I think, what's taking some time is determining not only the costs but also the jurisdictional issues we face as to DFO and the fisheries implications of that. So I know it's being worked on. I just don't know the timeline for its return. So I'll inquire about that.
Yeah, if we can just get a memo to see where we're at.
I don't know if we need a memo to see where that. I think we can get a timeline when we get too official. I mean, Mr. Bagan, I think you're sort of getting the message. Maybe this one can rise to the bit higher up if it's not.
I think it's been worked on diligently. I just don't know where it's at with the other government agencies.
So you can let members of council know where it's at, and then if you want to follow up further, Councillor Van Popta.
Thanks.
Yeah. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, and I'm thinking out as this came up. Mosquitoes are always been a challenge in mostly Fort Langley and other areas outside of the waterways. We have, if I may through the chair, we have a adopt the park, adopt the street program. I was using volunteers. I was just wondering if there's an opportunity to work with the I guess there's a Metro Vancouver Parks Foundation and others that have volunteer groups. Whether volunteers could be asked to help out to go around with those little nets and things like that and take the larvae out of the ponds and pools and things like that. I just wondered if I may through a chair if staff had thought about that. I know it's thinking out loud.
It's an interesting idea. The challenge is going to be the licensing requirements, even though it is, I guess, environmentally friendly, and as well the application requirements for it to be effective. So it is something that I think needs a certain degree of specialty skills. But that doesn't mean that they may be very helpful, however, in actually scouting and determining the locations where the clusters exist. And that's something we could look at.
Yeah, supplemental. It doesn't hurt for people to make sure that their wheelbarrows and their other potable items are either drained or something else so the water doesn't pool. I mean, I think there is an education program out there. So I just wanted to comment as well. Thank you. It's a good idea.
Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just curious through yourself to staff if, and whether it's in the form of a memo or something a little bit more informal just to get some insight. Looking at item number 12 on the February 9th distribution list in regards to a rodent issue within the township, if the staff are actually hearing that as a consistent issue and what we might do about it. And then secondly, repeatedly been expressed to me from neighbors in the kind of Willoughby Town Center area, just in regards to outstanding issue about a detention pond, and I know that that's been an issue for several councils now, and where that's at, what those issues were exactly, and maybe just a bit more of a formal kind of history of why that site might be an issue.
Mr. Bracken, you got that? Yeah, okay. Seeing no other discussion, I'll get a motion to resolve into special closed. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Kunst. Does anybody have an item to add? Please press the button to speak. Got to request a button to speak. There we go. Councillor Martins,
Yeah, I just would like to add a personnel item.
personnel item. I also, Ms. Bauer, I have a property item to add. Is there anybody else with any items to add?
Your worship, just noting the on-table items as well.
Yes, please. You can add those as well, yep. Actually, mine's illegal, sorry. It's probably both, but let's make it a legal item. Okay, with that, I'll call the question on our it carries unanimously. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Martins, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. All those in favor? Meeting hereby terminated. Thank you.